What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Lifestyle Athletics YouTube channel. Today I have a detailed breakdown on how I increase my speed. So I'm going to give you guys a detailed breakdown on the steps I take and my thought process when it comes on to increasing speed and how I help my athletes to increase speed.
And you know I'm running back. I want all the noise on the track, running laps, yeah. Like I'm Rod Troy, I'm living fast, switching lanes, yeah.
Without further ado, let's get right into it. The number one thing that I take into consideration when I'm trying to increase speed or an athlete's speed is going to be strength training. How explosive is the athlete? We're going to be strength training for explosiveness, right? That's going to be one of the number one things that I look at with a beginner athlete, an advanced athlete, or myself as an athlete. The first thing we're going to look at is strength training. I need to know how explosive you are, and if you are not explosive, we're going to build explosiveness, right? And how we build explosiveness is to focus on the posterior chain. What I mean by this, we're going to focus on everything at the back. We're going to focus on glutes, hamstring, calf muscles, Achilles, lower back, everything at the back, traps, every muscle at the back that forces me to go down and up. That's what we're going to focus on, right? So when we think about these muscles, there are only a few exercises that are really going to target these muscles in the way that we want it to, right? And when we think about power generation and speed and increasing speed and the movement of speed, it's all come from those muscles at the back. So the main goal is to strengthen those muscles and get those muscles as explosive as possible. And how I do this is we can incorporate squats, variations of squats. We could incorporate lunges, variations of lunges. We could incorporate cleans, variations of cleans. There's so many ways to go about it, but what I'm trying to explain to you is the main thing that you want to focus on, and the first thing that you have to look at if you're trying to increase your speed is how explosive are you, and focus on building a strong posterior chain. And the posterior chain muscles are going to be, if I go from the bottom, I'm thinking about Achilles, which is at the bottom. Then we think about calf muscles. Then we think about hamstring, then we think about glutes, the lower back, then we go right up to the traps, right? Those are the major muscles that we would focus on to get you as explosive as possible for sprinting. The next thing I take into consideration here and I look at is plyometrics, right? And what we think about when it comes down to plyometrics is which of these exercises will benefit the athlete better, because some athletes are more explosive, some are less explosive. And for plyometrics, we would start out with levels. So for example, we have a level 1 where we're just focusing on small bouncy movements. Then we get into a level 2 when we're focusing on quick ground contact. Then we have a level 3 when we're going long ground contact and trying to be as explosive as possible. So the goal for all of these is to get my athlete to be, again, as explosive as possible, try to be elasticy. Right? This is going to help to increase your explosive power. Plyometrics is going to help you to increase your explosive power. And the list goes on and on about how plyometrics translate to sprinting. But a few exercises you should consider is anything that's providing braking force. So you want something like calf hops. You want something like single leg hops. You want things like power skips. You want things like A skips, B skips. You want things like depth jump, explosive jump, right? You want broad jumps. You want power skips. You want bounding movements. So you want straight leg bounds, bent knee bounds, single leg bounds. You want stuff like those. Those are the things. You also want to incorporate a little bit of box work in there too, where we're doing explosive knee drive, standing up on top of a box. Those things will help you. Again, plyometrics is something that you should be doing all year round. This is not something that you add in the training in early season and then cut it out once the season starts. This is something that you interject into your training all year round. So that's going to be number 2. The next thing you want to focus on is unilateral movement. Remember, sprinting is a unilateral movement. You're not just in one plane. You're twisting a little bit. You're going to the back. You're coming to the front, right? So you want to focus on some side movements, like some side lunges. You want to focus on some single leg exercises, right? You want to focus on anything that forces you on one side of your body, then on the next side of your body. For me, this is my sweet spot. I love the single leg work. I love to force an athlete on one leg and then on the other leg, because then it wakes the athlete up to how strong they are and it shows them their weakness. Am I stronger on this side or weaker on this side? Right? That's something that I would take into consideration. With unilateral movements too, you could be focusing on, what you could focus on is anything that's gonna get you in all the planes, right? And when I say all the planes, I mean, when we think about all the planes, I'm talking about sagittal, we're talking about all the planes, right? You don't wanna just be doing a movement where it's up, down. You wanna be half the body this way, half the body that way, half the body this way. You wanna cut the body in 4 pieces, right? And that's how we look at it when we're thinking about sprinting and how unilateral movements translate to sprinting. So again, let's recap. Anything single leg, anything squats, deadlift, anything like that is gonna be unilateral movement. It's gonna be full body movement forcing you out of one plane into the next plane. And these moves directly translate to sprinting if you know how to put them in your training right. Alright? Next thing we want to look at here, this is a big one. This is the biggest thing for most sprinters. You want to make sure you're doing specific hamstring work, right? Get specific with certain muscles like the hamstring. You have to target the hamstrings because 95% of sprint injuries are going to be hamstring related, right? And all of these can be avoided if you spend time strengthening the athlete hamstring, teaching them about their body and showing them the proper way how to activate hamstring muscles for sprinting. Right? When we think about this, we want to think about what is the leg doing when we're sprinting. It's a driving up, pushing down, right? And that the hamstring is what helps you to drive that leg back and forth. So when we think about hamstring flexibility and hamstring strength in general, this is going to be huge. This is my thought process and of how I develop my athletes. The next thing we want to look at here is, let's look at sprint technique. We want to refine your sprint technique, right? You want your sprint technique to be top tier. We're gonna always be going back, recording videos, looking at what you're doing right, looking at what you could do better, and we're always refining sprint technique, right? We're always gonna be looking at your sprint start, so I'm gonna be checking out how you start from the 3-point position, the 4-point position, from the blocks. We're always gonna be looking at those, and this is something that you should be looking at all times. I would say record these sprint trainings so you could see what the athlete is doing, and there's always room for improvement there, right? And when we think about refining sprint technique, it could be stride length, it could be stride frequency, it could be ground contact, right? And all of these things equal speed, right? So when we think about stride length, we don't want our athletes to be overstriding. When we think about stride frequency, we don't want our athletes to be taking too much steps, right? You want quick, powerful steps, the legs landing under the body. That is the goal. That is the golden standard, right? And when we think about this, a few methods I use sprint drills, I use wicket drills, I use mini hurdles, high hurdles, anything that forces the athlete to get quick ground contact and understanding their body. Anything that forces the athlete to focus on coordination will help them to become a better sprinter, right? So for the sprint drills, you know the sprint drills, you know the A skips, the B skips, the high knees. I would say start small, start with high knees, butt kicks, A and B skips. Lock in those, get better at those, make sure your coordination is on point before you move on to anything else. And then for the wicket drills, this is great to teach an athlete quick ground contact and also hip position. Just angles of sprinting, right? Because I could stretch the cones out or I could make them smaller to force the athlete to put their foot down, depending on how the height of the athlete and what type of athlete I'm working with, right? So those are gonna be the top things. The next thing we're looking at here when we're talking about refining technique and form is you want to make sure you're doing ankle work, because the ankle takes a lot of pressure when you're sprinting. So if you have weak ankles, eventually you're going to create braking force down there, and then calves are going to start hurting, then knee, then hip, right? So what you want to do is make sure that you're spending time strengthening these areas. As you can see my lovely wife in the back right now, she recovered from a foot injury, right? And because she was babying one side of her body and babying the foot, then she developed a knee injury. So now again, we have to focus on strengthening up the knee. I also think we spend a lot of time focusing on strengthening up the hips, because if the knee hurt, eventually the hip is gonna hurt, right? Because if the knee, how the body operates is, if one part hurts, then another part compensates. So another part starts taking off the load off. So if your foot hurts, your knee starts to take the load off your foot, right? Naturally, your body does that. And then if your knee hurts, then your hips start to take the load off your knee. And then eventually, that's just a ripple effect of injuries on one side of your body. So that's what we're trying to avoid. So you want to do a lot of ankle work. You want to do a lot of just maintenance work on the joints to make sure that you have strong joints. Next thing we want to look at here is proper arm technique. A lot of sprinters neglect this. They don't work on proper arm technique. All they think about is just sprinting as fast as they can. There is an angle to sprinting, right? There is a way how your arms are supposed to look. I think big arms, big split when I'm coming to the front and at the back, and then when I want to be doing, what I tell myself is my fist is a hammer and I'm punching down, punch down, right? You want elbow passing your body with each swing. That's going to give you maximum effort out of your shoulders, right? Next thing we want to think about here when we think about refining technique is you want to look at foot strike. Where is your foot hitting the ground? Are your knees driving? Are you driving the knees up, right? Hitting the ground? Are you overstriding? Are you taking too much high knees? Because there is such a thing as driving your knees too high. So what you want to focus on is making sure that you're driving your knee to hip level, and also you're focusing on powerful steps with your legs landing under your body, right? Last thing here, again, we touched on this before. You want to work on, if you take choppy stride, you want to work on increasing your stride length and your stride frequency, and this will make you run faster. Guys, this is the key to sprinting fast. Stride length plus frequency equals speed, right? That's how you sprint fast. Think about the fastest guys of all time, right? Let me give you a good example. Wade Van Niekerk ran the 400 in Rio and broke the world record, right? And he took less steps than everybody, but he wasn't overstriding, right? That means he's covering more ground with more power, more stride length and frequency. Bolt took less steps than everybody in the 100. And this is a contrast because Wade was not the tallest guy in the field. Actually, he was one of the smaller guys in the field, but his strides were massive and powerful. There were taller guys in the field that were taking powerful strides, but they weren't as powerful as his. Right? So when we think about stride length and frequency, it's about covering ground with powerful steps, not overstriding, because then your hamstrings will hurt. All right, we're looking at optimizing posture and breathing here. You want to maintain a slight lean forward for your posture. You never want to be leaning back too much. You never want to be leaning forward too much. You want almost like a 45-degree angle to allow your legs to land under your body, right? For maximum power and maximum force output. That's what we're looking at. We want maximum ground contact. So when we think about maximum ground contact, we don't want to be too much forward, we don't want to be too much back. You want that 45-degree where the legs are dropping right under you so you could get maximum power to push out of the ground, right? You want your eyes focused on the ground. And when I say your eyes focused on the ground, I don't mean that you're looking directly down. What I tell my athletes is to look 10 meters ahead. So your chin is at a neutral head position. You're not leaning the head back because your head is balancing your body. So if you're throwing the head this way, your body going that way. If you're throwing the head this way, your body going that way, right? I tend to do this a little bit, so I try to straighten my head out. You see athletes doing this, opening the chest up. I tend to do this too, and I try to tell myself to come back here. Looking 10 meters ahead is the golden standard, right? When we think about breathing, you want to coordinate your breathing with your stride. This is tough, this is hard, right? This is not gonna be easy, because when we think about running a 400 meters, what I do is I get a rhythm with my breathing. I coordinate my breathing with my stride length and frequency. So I'm not panting, I'm taking nice deep breath, inhaling, exhaling, trying to push as fast as I can. Don't walk to the camera, you can walk that way, look, walk this way. Go that way. Oh, put it there. You going somewhere?
The temple.
Okay. Yeah, let's leave it there, yeah.
Should I put it in the pouch?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, so when we think about breathing, you want to make sure that you're not panting, taking lots of breaths. You want to be focusing on nice deep breaths. What I tell myself when I'm sprinting is I slow my breath down and I try to match my breath with my strides. Right? It's hard to do. It takes a lot of practice to do it, but once you lock it in, it makes a world of difference in how fast you could sprint and for how long you could sprint. Next thing we want to look at here is you want to make sure you're doing a proper warm-up and a cool-down. This is something I preach in my training. We actually have a standard where I teach the athletes how to warm up, and we have a warm-up that you do when you come based on what we're doing. And the warm-up never changes, and even if it changes a little bit, it's when it's cold outside, then we kind of make it a little bit longer. But the standard is if you're a 400 meter, you warm up a certain way. If you run the 100, you warm up a certain way. And what you want to focus on is dynamic stretches. You don't want to be doing a bunch of static stretches before you go and try to sprint all out, right? What I start with is like a light jog. For some athletes, it's a light jog. For some athletes, they do skips into strides. It's the same concept where we're trying to work for 5 to 10 minutes of some type of aerobic movement to get the heart rate up and get the blood flow going before we turn up the intensity, right? And you want to progressively get into strides. What I do is I do like a two-lap walk jog, and then I do dynamic stretches in between, then I do more dynamic stretches, then I get into like some 50 to 100 meter strides, but progressively turning up the tempo on those to get the blood flow going. And then what I'm telling myself when I'm doing these is I'm working on my sprint mechanics, I'm working on my form, I'm thinking about how I want my body to feel before I do my all-out sprint. And then, yeah, everybody knows the cool down need to be static stretches. You need to be holding them stretches for at least 30 seconds. That's the next thing. So let's move into the next one now. Next thing we're looking at here is acceleration and speed development. When we think about acceleration, we're talking about 0 to 10, 0 to 30, right? What are you doing from 0 to 10, 0 to 30? You want to focus on, if you're a 100 meter sprinter, you're hitting top speed as fast as you can, right? So I would say once you get up to 35, 45 meter, you should be close to top speed. If you're a 400 meter sprinter, you need to stretch that out a little bit. You wanna use up that free ATP in the first 20 to 30, but you also wanna make sure that you're not overexerting because you're gonna have to go down that backstretch and be able to have strength to finish. So what we like to focus on is we like to do sprint starts in the beginning, where we're doing crouch starts, where we're doing 3-point starts, just working on stride length and frequency. I have my athletes count steps. That's something that we do. It's okay. I have my athletes count steps. That's something that we do, so we know how many steps we're taking to 20 meters. So when you're in an actual race and you push out, if you're counting, you're gonna know exactly where you're at and how you're sprinting. Next thing we wanna look at here in speed development is one of the all-time golden standard is gonna be hill sprints. You wanna do hill sprints. This is gonna help you to develop strength and power. It's also gonna translate to how you accelerate. So the better you could get at doing sprint drills or doing drills up the hill is gonna make it easier to sprint, because naturally when you go up a hill, you have to run correctly. You have to push away from the ground. You're not gonna overstride. You're gonna do everything correctly because you're working a little bit harder. And this is something that all athletes should be doing. And I am a firm believer that you don't do hills in off season. You do hills all year round. Next thing you want to incorporate here is interval training into your speed development. Interval training could mean a million things depending on who you are as an athlete. But for us over here at Lifestyle Athletics, interval training means repeat 1s, repeat 2s, repeat 3s. Interval training can also mean we run 200, but they're really fast. So we run some 150s, but they're really fast, right? So what you can do next to develop speed, you can do a little bit of downhill sprints or descending sprints where you're at a slight decline and you're trying to sprint down the hill, focus on turnovers and go as fast as you can. That's something that could help you as well to increase your speed. And the last thing you want to do here is making sure that you're training consistently. The best way to get faster or to build speed is to train consistently. And you can't train for speed for 1 week and then disappear or don't train for a month and think you're gonna be just as fast. Actually, speed work, sprinting is linear. You have to be sprinting all the time to maintain your speed. And the more you sprint, the faster you're gonna get. You're not gonna get slower. It actually has a counter effect. The minute you stop sprinting, you lose all of it. You're at a higher risk for injury, so you wanna make sure that you're sprinting all year round. So guys, if you're new to the Lifestyle Athletics YouTube channel, welcome. For all my returning viewers, remember, if you're interested in sprint training, type sprint training under this video and then write me on Instagram, and then I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Until the next video, it's Rockstar Kato here, and I'm out. You caught me in action. And we got athletes coming in. That didn't sleep. Look at their faces. What time you guys went to bed last night? 12. Yeah, okay. And also, if you are interested in increasing your speed, leave a comment under this video and comment sprint speed, and then you also have to DM me on Instagram. So comment sprint speed, then DM me on Instagram, and we could get started. So serious inquiries only. My training programs are not free. I do have a generic program that I could assist you with, but if you are looking to really and truly increase your speed, it's not going to be free. So stay tuned for that. And again, if you are interested in sprint training, comment sprint training under this video, then go to my Instagram and then DM me. Then I'll get back to you as soon as possible. So,
and you know I'm running back. I want all the noise on the track, running laps, yeah. Like I'm Rockstar, I'm living fast, switching lanes, yeah.